Good morning, everyone. If everyone can take their seats, please. We're so glad you're here for the second day of our symposium on the U.S. Renaissance and Advanced Manufacturing. We had a wonderful day yesterday with the grand opening for the National Center for Coatings, and then we heard from Leland Melvin, the astronaut and head of education from NASA, yesterday at the Prizery. That was a superb presentation. Everyone was very much inspired by his talk about the need for STEM-based education to drive forward our vision to attract and grow advanced manufacturing companies in our region. And we have a power-packed day for you today with panel discussions, as well as speakers. So I'm going to go ahead and get right into our first speaker. We're very pleased and honored to have Will Powers, the Chief Financial Officer for Rolls-Royce North America. In this role, William Powers is responsible for all North American finance functions, including accounting, treasury, corporate development, business assurance, corporate risk management, taxation, and sales finance. He also serves as a member of the Rolls-Royce North America Holdings Board of Directors and its Government Security and Audit Committees. From 1995 until returning to the U.S. in June 2000, he was Chief Executive of Rolls-Royce Capital Limited, based in the U.K. Before that, he was Director, Mergers and Acquisitions for Rolls-Royce plc. In 1994, he served as General Manager, Sales Finance, Rolls-Royce Inc., based in the U.S. He first joined Rolls-Royce in 1989 as Treasurer and Head of Customer Finance. Prior to joining Rolls-Royce, he was the Barclays Bank plc's Aerospace Industry Unit from 1982 to 1989. Will serves on several corporate and nonprofit boards of directors. He is a member of the board of Exostar LLC and the Women's Center of Northern Virginia. He serves on the Industrial and External Advisory Board for the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering at the University of Virginia's School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. He is also on the Dean's Advisory Council for the University of Virginia's McIntire School of Commerce and the Villanova University Business School. Will joined the board of directors at Lord Corporation in August 2007 and serves on its audit committee. Will is a graduate of Villanova University School of Business, where he earned a BS in economics. He also earned a Master's of Business Administration in Banking and Finance from the Lubin School at Pace University in New York City. Please welcome Will Powers. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. As I said, my name's Will Powers. I am the EVP and CFO. I'm a no guy in the yes world at Rolls-Royce. As the introduction, I've been with the company since May of 1989, and I'm blessed to be a member of the 40,000 employees of Rolls-Royce. And we're seeking to provide better power for a changing world. In addition to all the traditional responsibilities that you heard about, you manage cash, you do capital schemes, you do strategic plans. One of the best parts of my job really was formulation of economic development policy, which in plain English is the guys who go out and decide where you locate factories and employ people. And part of the mission today really is to get people excited about that, and that there is possibilities and hope within manufacturing. And I can tell you without fear of contradiction, we hope some of you folks will be in our factories working at some point. Is this the clicker? Rolls-Royce plc is a power systems company that delivers power for air, land, and sea. Now, there's usually at this point some crestfallen faces in the audience. No, we are not the car company. We got rid of that, or it got rid of us back in 1972. The interesting thing about Rolls-Royce is we've been around since 1904. If you think about that, 108 years, there are not many companies that can lay claim to that type of a pedigree and a history. We literally had Henry Royce and Charles Royce, two guys who got together. And the reason why we are around to this day is basically we only do one thing, and we do it really well. We make engine gas turbines, okay? You know, and the 40,000 people in Rolls-Royce work incredibly hard. We have a revenues of 16 billion US dollars, and we have an order book of over $100 billion. Now, if you think about what is an order, basically it's a promise to give somebody a product at a point in the future, you know, for some money. And what I can tell you is right now we have more orders than we have factories. We actually have to go out and continue to build up our factory capacity as well as our supply chain partners to meet this as well as future demand. We are an incredibly blessed company in that regard, in that we can actually see that there is demand for our products out there going into the future. As an example, if you look at a plane called the 737 or the A320, well, the average age of that aircraft today, believe it or not, is about 25 years old. That means without any expectation of growth, and we all hear about how India and China and all these places are growing, that means that all of that capacity has to be replaced in the next 20 years because these planes do have useful lives that come to an end. Folks, that's the prize that everybody's fighting for. We as a supplier to Boeing and Airbus, you as potential people who want good careers. There is a macro picture out there that is within your grasp. So, the one thing is, the question I've been asked to address is, what does advanced manufacturing look like in the real world? I think that is a very fair question and well worth sharing our views with all of you today, and I hope to learn something from the other speakers too. Further, I think it's a very important question for the entire world and our nation as we grapple with huge macroeconomic problems that have beset the world at large and our nation in particular. I think it is very clear that our nation has woken up to that manufacturing matters and that advanced manufacturing matters even more. And without that as a component of our gross domestic product, the health and vitality of our economy just will not be very good. As a young man in Villanova, the speaker introduced me today, outed me. I studied the dismal science. I studied economics. And I've had a lifelong fascination with the creation of value and the creation of wealth. And I'll quote our former CEO, Sir John Rose. Really, there's only three ways, folks. One of the things Rolls is good is it breaks it down. There's three ways to create value. One is you can grow it. You can be a farmer. You can go out and grow crops. You can raise animals. That's value. You can dig it. You can go out and dig coal, as we do in Southwest Virginia. Uranium, which is popular in these parts. Maybe not so. And you have natural resources like timber. But the thing that creates the most value, and this is pretty much one of the facts that very few people can dispute, manufacturing creates the most value of all. The rest of all other activity, folks, is just moving it around. There's a reason they call banks financial intermediaries. It's basically a pipe through which things are pushed one end to the other, and you charge. You don't create value. You just charge more for it. So, my objective today is twofold. The first, honestly, is to avoid boring you to death. My daughter admonishes me, please, Dad, don't be a geek. Go up there and get all excited about advanced manufacturing. I can't help it. I do think it's exciting. The second really is to tell you our story as an advanced manufacturer and to share with you our observations and lessons learned from the so-called real world. I think the key thing that we've learned coming to Virginia is we've really enjoyed true partnerships. I look around the room. There's Delegate Marshall, there's educators that have worked with us, gone around and visited factories, talked to people. I think that's a process of mutual learning. You need to learn about what we need to do. We need to learn about what your needs are. Well, the other thing I've learned too in having little kids is to avoid boring people, you tell them a story. Today I'm going to tell you a story that honestly is not fiction and is one based with a potential happy ending. But having studied economics, I think it's also worthwhile telling you one of the other immutable facts of economics, in that there is no such thing as a free lunch. That the potential happy ending that we all can potentially enjoy from manufacturing requires us to undergo some deep change. People who have not traditionally worked together need to do so, and by that, it is our politicians, it is industry players, it is community leaders, economic developments, and one of the most important components is, I think, the integral thread, in fact, the bedrock, is the education system which we all rely upon. I will tell you up front today, your best economic development dollar is spent strengthening your school systems. Okay? That is one of the key lessons I've learned in the 10 years I've worked on economic development. The last thought on that is economic development is a team sport. All of those people have got to work together to develop a coherent package for companies. There's a historian named Santayana who said, those who do not remember history are condemned to repeat it. Unfortunately, I do think it's worth saying, how did we get to this point where we feel that manufacturing is unresolved, that our very existence in this thing is threatened? You know, over the course of the last 20 or 30 years, here in America, and for a company like Rolls-Royce, where our traditional roots have been in England, the United Kingdom, much of the rest of the industrialized world has borne witness to some very profound and wrenching changes that manufacturing in particular has been through. When you go back and you look, at the end of World War II, the United States controlled over 40% of the world's productive capacity. Now, that's a bit of a statistical quirk because we spent a good part of the early 1940s destroying the other guys. Germany, Italy, France, and Japan were traditional powers in this regard, were basically laid waste to. And it took about 10 to 15 years after the end of World War II to restore that capacity. I mean, if you look at pictures of Germany and Japan, it literally looked like the moon. So it takes a while to grow back from that type of position. And in their expectations, we had an almost unsustainable and natural advantage in manufacturing that, in effect, we used for good. We helped to rebuild these economies through the Marshall Plan and things of that nature. So a lot of what Rolls-Royce, the United States did in that regard was very good because it replaced fascist regimes with fully democratic ones that got their industrial history back. Unlike the rest of the world, the U.S. allowed the marketplace to operate. And in the 1970s, a resurgent Germany and Japan began to make some serious inroads into industries like cars, electronic goods, and computers. And unlike the rest of the world, the marketplace operation allowed the people to operate and close factories. It wrote off loans, and it let workers be fired and retrained into new fields. Now that's painful, but over the long term, the operation of a marketplace is a good thing. Now, in the 1990s, that market operation allowed the U.S. to, again, sort of emerge resurgent in a lot of key technologies, whether it was aerospace, microprocessors, computers, telecommunications equipment, and importantly, things like software. And the U.S., again, was sort of off and running, and there was a resurgence. And one other thing is that we've learned, all of us, is that change is constant, and the rules change all the time. And in 2000, the rules changed big time for manufacturing. The reemergence of China onto the world scene really had a dramatic effect, and probably the most profound one post-World War II. The so-called China effect came in. And what that meant is when you could charge, workers could charge $1 for what they did formally, it permanently disadvantaged the middle-skilled manufacturing job in the U.S. And what you saw really over that decade was a migration of, we think, about 6 million jobs. And the concomitant effect of that was profound. We saw thousands of factories close, particularly in the Midwest and in the South, and lots of jobs were lost. And the truth of the human cost of that was profound. A lot of companies, left towns where they traditionally, you only have to go to Danville down the road to see the effect of a factory that closed where I think at its peak it had 14,000 workers. You cannot take that amount of muscle out of an economy and expect not to have profound impact. The actual fact is there is no real news in this part of the story. Sadly, the only real lesson that we learned is that manufacturing matters and that we can and should be interested in what happens in this particular sector. We cannot be passive participants. The truly sad part of the story, in my judgment, is that we have taken that message in an incorrect fashion, in that we have suffered a more than severe loss in confidence in our ability to compete in this arena. The nation's ability in this has changed, but is not diminished. The reality is, while there's been large and significant losses due to offshoring, U.S.-based manufacturing and increasingly the presence of foreign corporations here in building factory capacity has demonstrated that a renaissance is underway and actually gaining momentum. This manufacturing resurgence has been aided by a number of things. One of it, as we watched the nation's candidates for president's debate last night, the one thing that screams out, if we ran a business like we run the federal government, we would be bankrupt. The fiscal mismanagement of the United States manifests itself in something called the dollar and its strength. Now, there is only one upside to the dollar getting weak. That means U.S. as a manufacturing site is increasingly competitive. And the scale and the scope of our problems are such that it's almost a secular problem at the moment. It's going to last for more than 5 or 6 years. So the golden nugget in that is, because the dollar is weak, it becomes an exporting power, and it makes us competitive against people even like China, which we'll come on to. But the resurgence is more than just a weak dollar. For all of the lawyer jokes we all tell, there is a rule of law in this country. You heard Romney talk about last night that he was involved with a valve company and he was finding counterfeit parts. Well, this is a very real problem. We've confronted even within Rolls-Royce. And believe me, you don't want to get on an aircraft that's not had a Rolls-Royce certified, or for that matter, Pratt & Whitney or GE part. There is intellectual property intolerances that are there for damn good reasons, mainly safety and the integrity of that quality of the engine. But one of the best things, and we've seen this firsthand, I can now testify to it personally, the U.S. worker is highly productive. The factory, for instance, that we have built up in Cross Point, Virginia, just south of Richmond, near Petersburg, is one of the most productive factories that Rolls-Royce has. We can and do compete globally for the dollars of capital in Rolls-Royce. So the workers here in America can and do, in fact, compete. So the good news is, folks, I'm coming to tell you in the stories, the tide is turning. The prediction of the demise of American manufacturing, I think, are likely to prove seriously wrong. The statistics would show that U.S. manufacturing sector does remain robust. Output levels, in fact, are 2.5 times 1970 levels on a much lower employment base. In plain English, that means we have learned to be productive. And that is the key going forward to competing against countries like China and other low-cost countries. Over the course of the last few years, there's been a lot of recognition by thought leaders. I've put up there, I just grabbed these off my shelf at work. Andrew LeVirus is my personal favorite, Make It in America. Now, if there's anybody who should be able to speak intelligently on this subject, it's Mr. LeVirus. He is the chairman of Dow Chemical. And I think a lot of the messages that he has captured in this book, and this is where my children chide me for being more, this is an important book because it teaches the value of education, it teaches the connectivity to community, and that we can, in fact, compete in not just the old line industries, but the emergent ones, and the ones that are highly dependent on things like math, science, and technology. If you look at other things up there, you have the Hal Serkin for the Boston Consulting Group. Made in America again. And we're going to come on to a lot of this gentleman's work because I think it's prescient. What you're seeing here is he has uncovered some macro forces that should give places like the southern portion of Virginia a lot of hope, and it should teach you to invest in yourself and to compete. The Economist and even the New York Times have recognized that manufacturing is part of a resurgent U.S. economy. Now, again, I'm a finance guy, and I'm a show-me person, and one of the jobs I have is to be a custodian of the company and the shareholders' capital. People put money into Rolls-Royce just like you folks do. You have 401ks and IRAs and stuff like that. They don't put it in there for fun. They put it in there to get a return on their money. They want dividends. They want capital appreciation in their shares. So this is about business. And so a lot of our decisions are based on cold, hard facts and management of risk. So I always say, why are we doing this? Is there a basis? Can I justify it? Well, the Boston Consulting Group, I think, you can take their old consultants, so they will tell you what you want at some level, but they're incredibly good at extracting data. And one of the things they've predicted is that the resurgence of competitiveness, and for that matter, the foreign companies operating from here. Now, law for evidence, recently there have been some big examples where Caterpillar has repatriated 2 manufacturing operations, one from Canada and the other from Japan. And they went, surprisingly, one to North Carolina, which is not too far from here, and the other into, believe it or not, Indiana, which has recently become a right-to-work state. So, and then if you add to that, major investment decisions by companies like Volkswagen, Honda, and things, which are going to use not only the U.S. as a base of operations to build stuff, but a platform to export from here to markets like Mexico and Central America. That tells you that other people are looking at these things in the same way. Boston Consulting Group estimates really that within 5 years, the cost of products in many industries will be within 10 to 15% of those made in China, in the coastal cities. Now, why are coastal cities important? It's about logistics. It's the UPS commercial, it's logistics, baby. Well, logistics cost things. Now, when you get to finance people, it's not just a cheap labor source in China. You have to ship it. You have to carry inventory, and you have to insure these things. And as wages fall in real terms here in dollar value, that gap with the People's Republic of China and other low-cost countries narrows. When you get to 10 to 15%, and if you add in the other advantages, qualitative, the United States, like things like the rule of law, the U.S. becomes extremely competitive. And if you're a company like Rolls-Royce, where you value your intellectual property, you also value the court systems because they will protect you and they will prevent theft. Interestingly, the Boston Consulting Group actually believes that locations like South Carolina, Tennessee, and Alabama could in fact be the least expensive locations for advanced manufacturing. Decisions by Boeing, BMW, Volkswagen, Airbus Industry, Caterpillar, ThyssenKrupp. And in there's a theme. There's a lot of these are foreign companies. So one of the messages, guys, we have to be open to the world. Trade with the world. In your school systems, languages matter. Math and science matter. Again, return to that basic message. Your education system is fundamental to this type of an opportunity. I think these are real-world endorsements of what is seemingly high-level macroeconomic data. Now, we're going to have to come on later to how does Virginia fit in this whole pile of things, because if you look, where did Airbus go? They went to Alabama. Where did Boeing go? To Charleston. Volkswagen went to Tennessee. There are reasons for this, I think, and we need to, as a Commonwealth, decide whether we're going to address that or not. If you look at all of the data that comes up, average wages and China's productivity, The data is flattering. One of the movies I really liked was Moneyball, and when that guy did was he went through in grinding detail and understood the statistics of these players, who got the runs batted in, who got sick. And I'm a finance guy, and I love numbers, and I love grinding through them. And I'll save you the trouble. The macro statistics do flatter us. We can compete on this thing. The gap now between us and low-cost countries for the kind of jobs we want is narrower. And I think it's important that everybody grasp that. There's a Moneyball type of proposition here. We can get these jobs. What are the conclusions? I think it would be wrong also to assume that certain industries will ever come back to us. And in these parts, that would, relevant would be furniture. They would be, textiles and things of that nature, because they will be reliant on low-wage, low-skilled jobs at some level. Now, I know there's been like a resurgence. There's been a furniture factory that came back to Danville recently. I think it came back for particular reasons. And if it does come back, the type of factory that you will see will be highly automated, and it will be more machines than people. So if it does come back, the effect on employment isn't going to be as profound, nor as wealth-creating as you might hope. However, the U.S. can increasingly be a strong competitor for advanced manufacturing jobs arising in aerospace, automotive components, chemicals, and any number of industries where there are high barriers to entry and high intellectual content embedded within their respective projects. Now, you can't be a finance guy without having bad news. The bad news, folks, is that we do have a looming skills gap. As George Harrison, the old Beatles said, it don't come easy, and it doesn't. Although there's a lot of macro concepts that have aligned to foster this revival, there is truly a gap in skilled workers, and it's forming a very real barrier for our nation, our region, for important and potential opportunities. This very weekend, I sat down and was reading the New York Times. Like it or lump it, it is one of the better respected papers in the world. Thomas Friedman's weekly comment, this is the gentleman who wrote The World is Flat, quoted Stephanie Sanford, a senior education jobs expert. The high-wage, medium-skilled jobs are over. Only high-wage jobs, whether in manufacturing or for that matter services, will be served by requiring more and better education. In fact, I think it's lifelong education. One of the non-financial metrics I look to in Rolls-Royce is how much are we investing in lifelong training of our employees? You constantly have to move your skill base up. And I think when I was talking with one of the people in the audience, education has to be redefined. It is a lifelong process. And if we're going to maintain our edge, that's what has to occur. The advanced manufacturer requires hourly workers to program, operate, and in many cases, maintain computerized machine tools that produce high-integrity products, whether they are low volume like in aerospace or high volume as in automotive components. The typical hourly worker needs to possess a higher level of education and skills, and by then I'll be very blunt, algebra, algebra 2, geometry, trigonometry, as well as strong reading and comprehension skills. Anybody who has been within our factory will get that in a minute. It is not the factory of the past. Our community and technical college system is woefully under-resourced in preparing the workforce for machining, welding, and mechanics in both sufficient quantity and quality. I think we've done a disservice to our technical college. I am a proud member of holding a bachelor's degree, but we really need to restore dignity to the type of students that come out of the junior college system. These are very important jobs. Not everybody's destined to go to a four-year college, and we need to go back and relook at that value proposition because we as a nation are suffering a skills gap. Many of our own company positions, including Rolls, struggle to fill these open positions today in an economy where you have 8% unemployment. I've seen this. We need to fill things, and we do not have kids walking through the door who can pass the math and science skills. And these are good jobs. They pay anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 and do not require a college degree. So I think these are real. And I know other companies in our supply chain, and as we sit in the industry associations, these exist. I go back to my message. Your best economic development dollar is spent in your school. Insist on value. If you don't, others will, because I can tell you candidly, places like Germany, the United Kingdom was beginning to understand it again, Singapore and Korea, all value technical education, all put a premium on creating a workforce that can operate at a high level of technically based education. If we can't service this existing level of manufacturing, we will almost certainly be disadvantaged. Why? Our backlog is real, and I'm sure everyone else who's operating this, they will make and need to make different choices. So I see this as one of the key things. Now, if you look, let's make it real. If you look at things like green, we all talk about green. One of the great things I've learned in Rolls-Royce is to simplify things. What green means is to make less hydrocarbons, pollute less. Well, in aerospace, that means you burn less fuel. How do you do that? You make things lighter. You use things like composites, okay? And composites are tricky little buggers. They're hard to work with. And right now, I'd say the community college system that works out how to train workers in working with composites will be one of the future winners in the jobs market. Because if you just go down the road to Kinston, North Carolina, where you have Spirit Aerosystems, and they're making airframes for basically Airbus. So these are all, by and large, being exported. Or go further down the road to Charleston, where the Boeing 787 is being built. Those aircraft are being made from composites. They're being made with that to burn less fuel, in essence. This is one of these technologies that will now migrate out from aerospace into automotive, into shipbuilding, into parts we haven't even thought about yet. So the prize there is it'll bring a supply chain, it'll bring jobs, quality jobs for people. The prize is huge. The challenge is great in that regard. So what is an advanced manufacturer? I mean, that's what we're here to sort of talk about today. And I put up there a lot of people who I think are the prototypical manufacturers. And I want you to think what's actually more important, and this is the opportunities open to communities like this. All of these companies have vast supply chains. In particular, aerospace and automotive have about a 30% overlap. So if you're making components for BMW, the chances are you're making them for General Electric, Pratt & Whitney, or Rolls-Royce. So there's a huge interconnectivity here. Again, I'm going to revert to the Boston Consulting Group and my good friend Andrew Levirus of Dow Chemicals, the two thought leaders that how do you define what is an advanced manufacturer? Well, let's make it really simple. There's really three component parts. The first is about 10% of your employees are in technically oriented occupations, engineering or scientists. And if you look at Rolls-Royce, of our 40,000 employees, about 7,000 are dedicated engineers of all colors and stripe. And we do have scientists that are studying advanced materials. Now, I think if you go to any of those companies, that metric will probably exist and be valid. Second, companies in this category, and this is important for communities like here, purchase 25% of their components and products from other high-tech companies. These are the so-called supply chain. As an example, a modern jet manufacturer, and this is all three of us, Pratt, GE, and Rolls, we actually only make 15 to 25% of an engine. The rest of those components, up to 85%, are bought on the supply chain network. And these factories, by value of the component, are either co-located, It's the reason we got 1,000 acres up in Cross Point. Or they spread out in concentric circles from that to, by values in distance. The higher value components will be produced in close proximity, and the lower values a little further away. The other attribute, and this is one if I was a community would want to know, is are they achieving productivity gains of at least 2.4% or more year on year? Why is that important? That means those people are awake to the fact that they're competing against people like China. China won't stay where it is. They will try to move up the food chain. So you need to stay in that game and constantly be moving ahead, changing for the better constantly. Examples of advanced manufacturing industries, according to these experts, and I agree, are transportation equipment, planes, trains, automobiles, and the components that reside within them, computers and electronic parts, machinery, electronic equipment, and appliances. Another critical factor or element of advanced manufacturing is that the hourly workforce possesses a higher level of education, certification, and skills that enable them to operate, maintain, or otherwise participate in the production of complex components and systems. Rolls-Royce. I think in many ways we are a prototypical advanced manufacturing company. The production of engine gas turbines and other power systems requires a sizable pool of dedicated engineers. Those are engaged in research, basic and applied, manufacturing engineering, and the list goes on, are needed to constantly improve and develop our products and to innovate ways to help our customers. And one of the things we have realized is everybody's under the same ethos. It's the same budget process. You have to do more with less. So unless you understand your customers need to do more with less, and our airlines, they need to do with less fuel. That means we have to make planes more energy efficient. Our products have to have that. And at the same time, we can't compromise safety or quality. Rolls-Royce will double our revenues if we didn't take another order in the next 10 years, just based on the orders we've captured to date. More importantly, we believe our products and services have an addressable market of over $2.9 trillion over the next 20 years, with the civil aerospace, meaning Boeing, Airbus type of products, leading the pack with $1.4 trillion. So there is an enormous market to play for. And that is the same market that Pratt and GE and all the people who reside behind us are playing for. The best news for us is much of our addressable market is pretty new. The Boeing 787, while delayed, is just being born. That product should have about a 25-year life. That, folks, I would urge you to all go to South Carolina and understand the magnitude of that opportunity, because I think it is an excellent example of what could be advanced manufacturing. It has the ability to replace things like furniture and textile if we make the ability to reinvest in our communities. The Airbus A350 XWB, which stands for Extra Wide Body, the Airbus A400M, the Littoral Combat Ship, and the Joint Strike Fighters are all programs which are just being born. These are the factories that Rolls-Royce has to build so we can meet the demand for these products. So what we have is a story of growth, and I think that speaks to the communities. You have choice in these matters too. I think the types of companies that you have to go, you need to put due diligence and thought into who you go after. You're going to put resources into building things. You need to demand what type of company comes to work with you. And get smart, and learn who these guys are and learn their values. How do they treat their communities and do they work? I would suggest most are pretty good. And the better ones are hard to capture, but it requires work and study. But you want to make sure that they have attributes like that in their family, and a lot of them do. I think that also gives rise to something, and we make this point to the folks in Richmond a lot. particularly the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. In order to meet this, we continue to build factories. Over the last 3 years, we've opened 14 new facilities in the United Kingdom, USA, Brazil, China, Singapore. Why? These are where our customers are. Here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we've completed $170 million of a $502 million commitment. Our second factory, and what we believe the first two supply chain partners, which will co-locate there with us, will be announced very shortly. Those will add approximately another 200 to 220 jobs and a concomitant amount of capital of about probably $200 million. We've also launched the Commonwealth Center for Advanced Manufacturing, which conceptually is a lot what you're doing down here. And when it reaches planned maturity, it'll have a staff of 140 researchers, most of them holding PhDs. By working with leading research-based universities of Virginia Tech, University of Virginia, Virginia State, we are leading, and with leading corporations like Siemens, Newport News Shipping, Sandvik, Chromaloy, Sulzer, Metco, we see the creation and extension as a game changer, one that will enable Rolls-Royce and the other members to sustain and promote quality improvements, cost reduction through a cross-section of industries. Again, this is important because this keeps us ahead of the game in terms of quality and productivity, because you will always have people like China, Germany, and things chasing at your heels. Given that the fact our customer base is global, the major theme that should emerge is that Rolls-Royce is blessed with a wide range of choices. As you can see from the slide, we've placed our factories where first and foremost they meet customer requirements. And then secondly, we look at the economic development packages. After considering what's best for the customers, Rolls-Royce sits down and evaluates its options on a comprehensive set of criteria. The coordination and cooperation of stakeholders. Do you have a focused strategy for bringing aerospace companies in? What's your infrastructure like? Can we actually get our products to a port, to an airport, onto a rail system? Importantly, the pool of skilled labor. We actually drilled it down and we knew how many mechanics were within 60 miles of our plant. How many were produced by the community college system? And we look at the support and integration for supply chain factors. It's a team sport. If our suppliers can't do well, we can't do well. And we look at favorable regulations and a positive business environment. So, how did we do here in Rolls-Royce, and how did our decision go? Well, about 5 years ago, when we looked at the demand for our product, it was going through the roof, and it's continued to this day. Simultaneously, the U.S. dollar had started its descent, and it was actually got to the point where the U.S. dollar to sterling, which was our traditional base, it got to 2 to 1. And every 1 pence movement in that exchange rate basically was $10 million of cash and profit, either way. That's too much volatility to have. So we took the decision at that point to expand our domestic U.S. marketing, our manufacturing base, away from our traditional. From the very outset, Rolls-Royce advertised and communicated we were seeking a relationship and not merely a transaction. We launched a highly focused 8-state competition to capture the 500-person, $502 million investment. And we wanted the flexibility to decide whether to assemble, test, or manufacture as we needed to. Interestingly, in the middle of this competition, the Republic of Singapore got wind of this and launched a request for a proposal and submitted an offer that actually got much of the same work that contained in our original RFP. We ran an intentionally transparent campaign, and by that, we actually set up a website. So if North Carolina asked a question, or South Carolina or Virginia, we not only posted that question, we posted the answer. We wanted people to know what we were about. This isn't a secret. The problem is when you put a factory down like that, you're forming a relationship with that community, and you have to have trust. You're going to go through good times with them and bad. And I think it's very important that people know what you're about. We went through these with grueling detail over 9 months. And when we announced the selection of Virginia, that was the first greenfield site outside of the UK. Now, I think it's equally important to note Singapore, through their preemptive bid, got $500 million and 500 jobs too. And I think that demonstrates something important, that in the case of Virginia and all other states, you're not only competing against South Carolina, you're competing in some cases against sovereign nations, which isn't fair, but it is reality. Rolls-Royce was blessed with a set of acceptable venues. Virginia worked incredibly hard to convince us that not only did it possess the quality of life, especially defined by high educational standards, but that it would be both welcome and relevant to the regional economy over the long term. Rolls-Royce's decision was based on a comprehensive set of incentives. We got a substantial tract of land, 1,000+ acres. I think that speaks to our ambition. I think that speaks to the opportunity when you look at Airbus coming here and Boeing in Charleston and just the presence of aerospace in the U.S. I think it gives us the ability to expand over the next 50 years. We got infrastructure improvements. You needed roads, you needed shovel-ready land, you needed it quick. We got tax incentives, workforce development incentives, the Governor's Opportunity Fund, and very importantly, a comprehensive set of incentives to the research universities that covered upgraded labs, chaired professorships, advanced manufacturing research centers, and most importantly, monies for internships for students in both engineering and business. Why does that matter? Because at the end of the day, we need skilled engineers, we need skilled workers. And I think we realized that Virginia was committed to our future, and we were relevant to these educational institutions. Well, how's the decision turned out? Well, despite entering the deepest recession since the Great Depression, we decided to proceed with our plans and build up our dollar-based capacity. And overall, our decision to come to Virginia has proven to be a good one. Oops, I'm not keeping up with it. Sorry. From the outset, we have had superb support from the governor, the legislature, and all levels of local government. We have had superb access to Governor Bob McDonnell, as well as his predecessor, Tim Kaine, and along with key members of the state legislature who have provided key support to trade missions to the Paris and Farnborough air shows, visited our factories, which are really important venues for us to attract our supply chain partners. We would also be seriously remiss if we did not acknowledge the Virginia Tobacco Commission for their efforts to help us with the establishment of this Commonwealth Center for Advanced Manufacturing and supporting our efforts to recruit supply chain partners to the state and really help us to drill home that we need to do workforce development reform. The quality of our workforce and their ability to produce, as I said earlier, to build complex components and meet aggressive inventory turn times have met or exceeded our expectations. At Crosspoint, we have the highest inventory turn time system-wide and the highest quality. And most importantly, highest safety. We have not had a single safety incident. Not that we won't, but if you can't keep your workers safe, you won't have the culture that you want. Our relationships with the research-based universities have been excellent and in many ways the bedrock of our public-private partnership. I'd like to acknowledge that Delegate Marshall, as an individual, has given a lot of his personal time to be dragged over Hillendale and Toulouse, France, and Derby, England. And I was struck when we were there one time, there was a blog, somebody had written that these guys were on a boondoggle. And they were being dragged through very hot southern France, being made to look at airplanes. I think these are tax dollars well worth spending because you are signaled to these companies that you're interested, and the only way you do that is face-to-face. So anybody who thinks a trade mission to Derby is the equivalent of Las Vegas, come on with me. And then you can write a letter to the editor on behalf and defend these guys. So what needs improvement? Well, when we came to Virginia, The one area we knew straight up front was there was a weakness in the workforce development. The technical education system here in Virginia is in need of some reform and a more focused and industry-led investment, curriculum, and above all, and I say it all the time, is the scale. While there are pockets of advanced manufacturing, I'll cite Danville Community College is one, John Tyler Community College is another, who get the message. The problem is they only produce 25 or 30 of these types of graduates. You need to add 1 0, 2 zeros to that capacity if the Commonwealth wants to capture opportunities like Volkswagen and Boeing. I do believe, and particularly again, the Tobacco Commission has been incredibly constructive in this regard. They are listening, and they are working with us and other members to try to get that message across and to work in a non-confrontational fashion with our legislature to get these things aligned. The one thing Rolls-Royce has been struck with is we work with our politicians, and thankfully it is not really a rabidly partisan state. People actually care about doing the right thing. And I think, whether it was Governor Kane or McDonnell, we have been gratified that people really are about doing business in the Commonwealth. Having said that, Virginia still lags many of its domestic competitors on the workforce development, especially in the southeast of the U.S. I would cite Georgia as the best, and South Carolina is close. Tennessee is learning very quickly. Boeing's and Airbus's decisions to stand up facilities in South Carolina and Alabama again underscore the scale and the reality of this and the transformative power that it has on communities. If you haven't seen it, you do need to see what's going to happen in Charleston and in Boeing. These will transform these economies. We do see the pockets. What we want and our supply chain want is those pockets to get deeper and wider. The simple fact is that while they're promising, we don't have the scale at present, and we need to hurry up and get there. The good news is that we believe the key stakeholders in Virginia see this as a major challenge and are hopefully beginning to take the steps to address it. Well, I think that's as much as anybody should be subjected to on advanced manufacturing. I hope I haven't bored anybody to death. Nobody's nodded off that I can see. I hope you found the story compelling. Rolls-Royce is a great company. I'd like to thank everybody here today for inviting us, the legislators who've supported us, the educators who've listened. It's been a terrific experience. Thank you.